one of those muggle machines? Hello, muggles. You should be asleep by now. Not wandering the castle. Well, look who it is. Get yourself cozy and I'll see what I've got in this book here. Let me see here. Maybe some Christmassy tales will put you to sleep. Yes, this one sounds good. The blizzard had transformed Hogwarts into a crystalline maze, forcing students to forge new paths through snow-filled corridors where windows had blown open. It was during one such detour that the Gryffindor twins, James and Sarah Blackwood, discovered the forgotten portrait. "Look," Sarah whispered, brushing away centuries of dust and frost from the canvas. "She's wearing the original head girl badge." The portrait showed a striking young witch in midnight blue robes, her dark hair threaded with silver ribbons. As the twins cleared away more snow, her painted eyes flickered open, showing the same deep amber color they shared. "Well," the portrait said, studying them with an unsettling intensity, "after 4 centuries, blood calls to blood." She smiled, touching a silver locket at her throat. "I was Evangeline Blackwood, the first head girl of Hogwarts, and your many times great-grandmother." James and Sarah exchanged stunned looks. Their father had often spoke of their family's long connection to Hogwarts, but this... "I've waited for ones like you," Evangeline continued. "Twins born with the gift of magical synchronicity. Only such siblings could complete what I left unfinished." "What do you mean, unfinished?" James asked, as Sarah leaned closer to the portrait. "A task begun on my last Christmas at Hogwarts in 1648. 3 objects I enchanted and hid throughout the castle. My silver locket, my enchanted quill, and my astronomy globe. They must be found before winter's end, or something precious will be lost forever." "But why us?" Sarah pressed. "Why now?" The items will only reveal themselves to those who share my blood and purpose. I enchanted them thus to ensure they wouldn't fall into the wrong hands. Evangeline's expression grew grave. Time grows short. The first clue lies in this verse. Where knowledge flows in silence deep, past wisdom's guardians fast asleep, seek the heart of what we save in binding's tomb and paper's grave. The library, the twins said in unison, their magical synchronicity humming between them. Indeed, Evangeline smiled. But remember, the items must be found in proper order. The locket first, for it guides to the quill, which in turn reveals the globe's location. And be warned, dark magic has a way of preserving itself. You may not be the only one seeking what I hid. The portrait's edges began to frost over again, spreading inward like creeping ivy. Hurry, Evangeline's voice grew faint as ice crystals reclaimed her canvas. Winter's end approaches, and with it, a darkness I sought to contain. Find them, please. The portrait fell silent, leaving the twins alone in the snowy corridor with nothing but an ancient riddle and the weight of their ancestors' unfinished task. The silver locket, when finally discovered beneath a loose stone in the library's restricted section, contained more than just ancient magic. As James held it up, the pendant projected a shimmering memory into the air. Evangeline, standing before a massive underwater cavern, directing magical creatures to safety. It was the height of the creature hunts, her voice whispered from the locket. Muggles and magic folk alike were destroying what they feared or didn't understand. Someone had to protect them. The twins spent frozen evenings in abandoned classrooms, studying the locket's memories while keeping watch for Filch approaching. They learned how their ancestor had discovered a network of caves beneath the Great Lake, transforming them into a sanctuary for endangered magical beings. The enchanted quill proved harder to find. Following the locket's guidance, they tracked it to the highest tower, where it had nested among actual phoenix feathers. When Sarah first wrote with it, hidden words appeared in an old journal they'd found with the locket. The sanctuary holds the last breeding pair of Highland basilisks, whose gaze can heal rather than kill. 3 ice phoenixes thought extinct, a colony of frost dragons no larger than house cats, magic's rarest children, all safe within the waters. But their pursuit of the final item, the astronomy globe, was interrupted by disturbing signs. The lake's surface had begun to ripple with unnatural patterns. Strange lights flickered in its depths. Worst of all, the giant squid had abandoned its usual haunts, as if fleeing something in the deeper waters. The sanctuary's failing, Sarah realized one evening, as they pored over Evangeline's journal in their common room corner. That's why she needs us now. When winter ends and the ice melts, every magical creature hunter in Europe will discover what's down there, James finished grimly. Their search took on new urgency, but maintaining secrecy proved challenging. They had to dodge not only teachers and prefects, but also their fellow students' growing curiosity. Rumors spread about the Blackwood twins' midnight wanderings, their whispered conversations, the ancient books they studied. Someone's following us, Sarah warned one night as they hurried back from the astronomy tower. I've seen the same shadow more than once. The final entry into Evangeline's journal confirmed their fears. There were those who opposed the sanctuary's creation, dark wizards who sought to harvest rare creatures for their power. I set wards against them, but after 4 centuries, such magic may be failing, along with the sanctuary's walls. Time was running out. Ancient protective spells were unraveling beneath the lake, while above, the winter ice that hid the sanctuary grew thinner with each passing day. Somewhere in the castle, their mysterious shadow still lurked, watching, waiting. The globe has to be somewhere. We haven't looked yet, James said, studying the castle blueprints they'd borrowed from Professor Flitwick's office. something in the locket's memories, something we've missed. Sarah sat up suddenly, eyes wide. "The mer people," she whispered. "We've been looking in the castle. But what if—" James nodded slowly. "What if the globe isn't in Hogwarts at all? What if it's already in the lake?" A midwinter dawn found James and Sarah standing at the lake's edge, their recovered treasures laid out on the ice. Silver locket, enchanted quill, and finally the astronomy globe, retrieved from an underwater Mer People temple with the chieftain's help. "The three must become one," Sarah read from Evangeline's journal. "When the stars align with the depths below." James placed the globe in the center. Sarah arranged the locket's chain in a circle around it, while the quill pointed north like a compass needle. As they joined hands, their twin magic resonating, the three artifacts began to shine with an inner light. The globe's constellations projected onto the lake's frozen surface, aligning perfectly with the sanctuary's hidden chambers below. Where the stars met ice, gold lines spread like cracks in glass, revealing an intricate map of the underwater complex. But they weren't alone in their discovery. A hooded figure emerged from the shadows of the forest, the same one that had stalked their search. "How fitting," came a silky voice. "The sanctuary's location revealed at last. My department has waited centuries for this." "Department?" James stepped forward protectively. "Yes, of magical creature registration and control. We've long suspected something was hidden in these waters. Such rare creatures, properly harvested." Suddenly, the Mer chieftain burst from the lake in a spray of ice, his trident leveled at the ministry worker's chest. Behind him, a dozen Mer warriors rose from the waters, spears gleaming. "The sanctuary is under our protection," the chieftain sang in haunting Mer song, which the twins could somehow understand, as it has been since Evangeline first entrusted us with its secret. The ministry worker retreated, outnumbered. "This isn't over. When the ice melts, the sanctuary will be stronger than ever. Sarah declared, understanding at last flowing through her like a current. She raised the locket, James the quill. Together they touched the globe. Power surged through their twin bond. The artifacts dissolved into pure, magical energy, flowing into the twins like starlight. Ancient knowledge filled their minds. Every protection spell, every creature's needs, every secret passage, and every hidden chamber. The Mer chieftain smiled. So, Evangeline chose well. Not just blood relatives, but true heirs to her work. That's what she was really protecting all these centuries, James realized. Not just the creatures, but the right guardians to watch over them. Together, the twins and the Mer people renewed the sanctuary's ancient spells. They wove new enchantments through its walls, crafted modern protections to complement the old. Within the magically expanded chambers, rare creatures would continue to thrive, safe from those who would harm them. As winter slowly turned to spring, the Blackwood twins settled into their new role as sanctuary guardians. Like their ancestor before them, they had found their true purpose in protecting magic's most vulnerable children. And in the depths of the lake, ancient creatures were safe in Hogwarts waters, their secret kept by a new generation of guardians. Theodore Theo Bennett had always found more comfort in gears than in spells. While other first years mastered basic charms, he spent his time studying the intricate mechanics of his grandfather's pocket watch, his Muggle mother's gift. It was the one familiar thing in this overwhelming world of magic. So, when Hogwarts' great clock tower began to chime 13 times at noon, Theo was the first to notice something was wrong. In the Great Hall, hourglasses measuring house points flowed at odd intervals. Even the enchanted sundial in the courtyard cast impossible shadows. Fascinating, isn't it? A voice whispered behind him as he examined the castle's primary timepiece. How time itself, seems to be unwinding. Theo spun around to face a translucent figure in medieval craftsman garments, spectral tools hanging from a leather apron. Unlike the other ghosts, this one seemed to shimmer with traces of copper and brass. Master Bartholomew Cogsworth, the ghost, introduced himself with the clockmaker's precise bow. Original horologist of Hogwarts, creator of the castle's temporal network, and perhaps the only one who appreciates these mechanisms as much as you do, young man. Theo's eyes widened. You built all the clocks. Built them, my boy. I invented them. Each timepiece is part of a greater whole, a system that helps regulate the castle's magical flow. Bartholomew drifted closer to the clock face. Magic, you see, requires rhythm, like a heartbeat, like the turning of seasons. The clocks provide that rhythm. As if to emphasize his point, the minute hand suddenly lurched backward, and somewhere in the castle, a staircase ground to a halt mid-rotation. A suit of armor began moving in slow motion. But now, something's interfering with the temporal network, Bartholomew continued. Time magic is delicate work. A single misaligned gear. He gestured the malfunctioning clock, his ghostly hand passing through the mechanism. Can't the professors fix it? Most wizards rely too heavily on spells alone. These clocks require both magical and mechanical understanding. In my day, we knew the value of combining the two. He studied Theo thoughtfully. Perhaps that's why you're here now, when the clocks are failing. Sometimes magic knows what it needs. The ghost held out a spectral hand. Would you like to learn the art of magical horology, Theodore Bennett? To see how engineering and enchantment can work as one. Theo reached out instinctively, his hand passing through Bartholomew's with a sensation like static electricity. Above them, the great clock shuddered and struck 14, though it was only 3:30. We haven't much time, Bartholomew said with a wry smile. The castle's magic weakens with each temporal distortion. By Christmas. He left the sentence unfinished, but the worry in his transparent eyes said everything. Under Bartholomew's guidance, Theo began learning the secrets of Hogwarts' temporal network. Behind every clock face lay an intricate fusion of magic and mechanics. Enchanted gears that turned counter to gravity, crystalline pendulums that swung in multiple dimensions, and delicate spellwork woven through copper wires like strands of silk. Each repair will show us more, Bartholomew explained, as Theo balanced on a ladder, using his grandfather's watchmaking tools to adjust a particularly stubborn chronometer. The clocks protect their own secrets. The ghost spoke true. As each timepiece was restored, walls would shift, revealing hidden passageways. Paneling slid aside to expose workshops, forgotten for centuries, filled with mysterious instruments and dusty technical journals. But they also found something disturbing. Deliberate sabotage. Gears had been precisely misaligned, enchantments carefully unwound. This was no accident or magical decay. Look at this, Theo said, extracting a twisted piece of metal from behind the clock face. It bore the initials MT and a date from 20 years ago. Bartholomew's ghostly form flickered with recognition. Marcus Timeweaver, brilliant student, obsessed with temporal magic. He believed the clocks limited the castle's power, that Hogwarts would be stronger if time flowed freely within its walls. But that's mad, Theo protested, remembering how the staircases had nearly thrown students off when the clocks malfunctioned. The castle needs structure. Indeed. I failed to make Marcus understand that. He left Hogwarts bitter, vowing to liberate its magic. As Christmas drew closer, they discovered more of Marcus's sabotage. He had laid dormant spells throughout the network, set to trigger in sequence. Each repair they made revealed another layer of his plan. Theo worked tirelessly, combining his Muggle engineering knowledge with what Bartholomew taught him about magical mechanics. Where Marcus had severed connections between timepieces, Theo used old copper wire from his electronics kit to bridge the gaps. When enchanted gears wouldn't mesh, he applied principles of mechanical tolerance he'd learned from repairing watches. Remarkable, Bartholomew mused, watching Theo synchronize a cluster of chronometers using a digital watch as a reference. You can see what Marcus never could, that Muggle science and magic can strengthen each other. But time, indeed, was running out. As Christmas Eve approached, the temporal distortions grew worse. Students found themselves repeating the same hour, or skipping several hours altogether. Painting showed scenes from different centuries, depending on the time of the day. Even the ghosts began to drift between past and present. The final failsafe, Bartholomew said gravely, pointing to the astronomical clock in the tower's heart. Marcus knows that when it strikes midnight on Christmas, all of Hogwarts' timepieces synchronize. He's using our repairs to channel power to the main mechanism. Theo studied the massive clock, its face showing not just time, but the positions of planets and stars. If he disrupts the synchronization, all of our work will backfire. Instead of restoring temporal stability, cut in Theo. Yes, it'll shatter time completely within the castle walls. Theo clutched his grandfather's watch like a talisman. How long do we have? The ghost checked a nearby chronometer, then frowned as it began spinning wildly. That's just it, my boy. I'm no longer sure what time it really is. Christmas Eve arrived in fragments, time splintering like light through a cracked prism. In the great hall, the feast existed in multiple states simultaneously. Turkeys, both cooked and raw. Puddings, both whole and half-eaten. Students caught between bites that never ended. He's here, Bartholomew whispered as they raced up the astronomy tower. Marcus always did love an audience for his grand experiments. They found Marcus at the heart of the clock mechanism, older but unmistakable from the photographs Theo had discovered. He stood before the astronomical clock, its massive gears grinding as temporal magic swirled around him like a storm. "Ah, Bartholomew," Marcus smiled, still trying to keep time in its cage, and with a first-year apprentice, no less. "You don't understand what you're doing." Theo stepped forward, clutching his grandfather's watch. "The castle needs temporal structure. I've seen how the mechanisms work together." "A child playing with clocks," Marcus scoffed. "This is advanced temporal magic." "No," Theo interrupted, his hands steady as he opened his watch's case. "This is engineering. Magic is just one part of the equation." Understanding dawned as he studied the astronomical clock's workings. Like his grandfather's watch, it was essentially a mechanical computer. The magical elements weren't controlling time. They were measuring and stabilizing it, using the same principles he'd learned, taking apart Muggle timepieces. While Marcus monologued about magical liberation, Theo slipped his grandfather's watch into a gap between the larger gears. Its precise Swiss movement, though tiny, was perfectly calculated to counteract the temporal distortions. "The synchronization is beginning." Marcus raised his wand as the first Christmas bell tolled. But something was wrong with his spell. The watch's steady rhythm was interfering with the chaos he tried to introduce. Mechanical precision met with magical power, and in their convergence, Theo saw the solution. "Sir Nicholas," he called to the Gryffindor ghost who'd followed them up. "The chandelier." The ghost understood instantly, tipping the crystalline structure. Light scattered through its prisms, refracting through the watch's crystal and amplifying its natural rhythm. Each beam struck a different part of the mechanism, creating a synchronized network of light, magic, and mechanics. "Impossible." Marcus stumbled back as the clock began to stabilize. "You can't control temporal magic with Muggle technology." "I'm not controlling it," Theo explained, watching time ripple back into proper flow. "I'm helping it find its natural rhythm again, like a heart finding its beat." The final stroke of midnight rang true and clear. Throughout Hogwarts, clocks aligned, temporal distortion smoothed, and the Christmas feast settled into its proper moment. Marcus's spell, meant to shatter time, instead dissipated like mist in the morning sun. In the days that followed, Theo's integration of magical and mechanical techniques drew attention from the Department of Mysteries itself. Theo still struggled with traditional spells, but he'd found his own way to work with magic. Every weekend, he and Bartholomew's ghost could be found in the clock tower, teaching interested students about the beautiful intersection of science and sorcery. And his grandfather's watch, now permanently part of Hogwarts' temporal network, kept perfect time. Though some swore that on quiet nights its tick-tock carried a subtle hint of magic. The great hall's enchanted ceiling reflected the gentle descent of snowflakes as Elena Martinez sat alone at the Ravenclaw table, absently twirling her wand between her fingers. The familiar motion reminded her of conducting orchestra back home in Madrid, before magic had called her across the sea to Hogwarts. Now, in her third year, she had chosen to remain at the castle over Christmas holidays, hoping to practice her charms in the quiet of an empty school. As she hummed a snippet of Bach's cello suite, her wand suddenly vibrated with a clear, resonant A-flat. Elena nearly dropped it in surprise. She had grown accustomed to her wand's strangeness, the way it seemed to sing when she cast spells, how it thrummed pleasantly during charms class. But this was different. Holding it still, she noticed the tone changed as she moved it through the air, like turning a radio between stations. Fascinating, came a dreamy voice behind her. I haven't heard one song in nearly 30 years. Professor Whitworth, an ancient teacher, stood watching her with eyes that sparkled behind spectacles. His robes, decorated with shifting constellations, seemed to twinkle in harmony with his gaze. I'm sorry, Professor, Elena said, quickly lowering her wand. I didn't mean to make noise. Oh, but you did mean to, my dear, even if you didn't know it. He settled onto the bench beside her with surprising agility. Your wand is singing to the castle's magic. A rare gift indeed. You are a wand singer. Elena stared at her wand with new wonder. A wand singer. Yes, magic has its own music, Miss Martinez. Few can hear it. Fewer still can conduct it. He smiled mysteriously. And you've just arrived when Hogwarts might need such a gift most of all. In Professor Whitworth's office, surrounded by whirring silver instruments and floating mathematical models, Helena learned of Wand Singing's forgotten legacy. Professor's collection of ancient books revealed how medieval wizards had woven protective enchantments through song, their wands conducting symphony and sorcery as one. The strongest wards around Hogwarts, Whitworth explained, turning a weathered page illuminated with musical notation, were cast by wand singers during the castle's founding. They would gather at the changing of season, when magic flows most freely, and renew the protections through harmony. But as Helena practiced directing her wand like a conductor's baton, drawing forth shimmering notes from the air, an unsettling change crept through the castle. Torches flickered with shadow-laden flames. Frost patterns on windows grew twisted and strange. Even the suits of armor seemed to shiver in their alcoves. Late one night, Helena's wand woke her with a discordant screech. Following its pull, she discovered Professor Whitworth in the castle's foundations, examining a crack in the stone walls that leaked tendrils of darkness. "The winter wards are failing," he said gravely. "Without the wand singer's seasonal renewal, the ancient protections have grown weak. Dark things that remember the old days before Hogwarts may soon find their way in." Helena's mind raced to the Christmas carols she'd grown up singing. "Professor, what if we could adapt traditional wizard carols for wand singing? They're already filled with protective themes and seasonal magic." Whitworth's eyes lit up. Yes, but you need other voices, other wands to weave a protection strong enough. And so began Helena's desperate race against the deepening winter. Between some classes, she reached the library for traditional wizard carols, translating their lyrics into wand song. In empty classrooms, she practiced for hours, learning to thread magic through melody until her wand hummed in perfect pitch. But finding other students proved challenging. Most had gone home for holidays, and those who remained were skeptical of her strange magic. Wand singing sounds like something Peeves made up, scoffed a fifth-year Slytherin. Yet, slowly, her choir grew. First came Luna Zhang, a first-year who claimed the castle's songs had been appearing in her dreams. Then, the Aldrich twins from Hufflepuff, whose family descended from Welsh magical bards. Even Scorpius Knot, the reluctant Slytherin, joined after witnessing Elena demonstrate how different spells created distinct musical tones. As the winter solstice approached, Elena drilled her small group relentlessly. Some days brought triumph, moments when their wands sang in perfect harmony, creating shimmering barriers of pure sound. Other times ended in chaos, with spells backfiring and eardrums singing. Through it all, the castle's condition worsened. Shadows lengthened, temperatures plummeted, and students reported hearing strange whispers in the depths of night. "We're running out of time," Whitworth warned, showing Elena how the crack in the foundations had spread like a dark web through the stone. The solstice draws near, and the barrier between worlds grows thinnest. If the wards aren't renewed by Christmas Eve. He didn't need to finish. Elena could feel it in her wand's trembling song. Hogwarts' very magic was unraveling, note by note. Christmas Eve arrived with an unnatural darkness that pressed against the castle windows like a living thing. The crack in the foundations had spread throughout Hogwarts, sending waves of ancient magic rippling through the corridors. Portraits huddled together in their frames, whispering of shadows that moved against the light. Elena gathered her choir in the great hall as the enchanted ceiling writhed with strange auroras. Professor Whitworth had arranged them in a perfect octagon, each position corresponding to a cardinal point of magical resonance. 8 students, 8 wands, 8 voices to reweave what time had undone. "Remember," Elena said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Let the magic flow through both wand and voice. The carols know the way. They've carried wizard wishes for centuries." She raised her wand like a conductor's baton, and for a brief moment, doubt gripped her. Then she felt it. The castle's magic, humming beneath her feet, reaching out like a drowning swimmer seeking rescue. Elena began with Carol of the Bells, its ancient Ukrainian melody transformed into a spell of warding. Her wand traced glowing patterns in the air as she sang, each note carrying threads of protective magic. One by one, the other students joined in, their wands adding harmonies that shimmered like the northern lights. The castle itself seemed to sing with them. Stone walls resonated with centuries of magic, harmonizing with their spell song. Even the ghosts added their ethereal voices to the chorus. But as they began God Rest Ye, Merry Hippogriffs, darkness surged through the cracks in the walls. Elena's wand vibrated with warning. She could feel the ancient wards crumbling faster than they could rebuild them. In that moment of crisis, Elena remembered Professor Whitworth's words about seasonal magic. She suddenly understood. They didn't need to create new protections. They needed to awaken the old ones. Follow my lead, she called out, transitioning into Hogwarts Carol, the school's oldest Christmas song. Its lyrics, half forgotten by modern students, contained fragments of the founder's original protective spells. As 8 voices sang the ancient words, their wands wove streams of golden light that spiraled up to the enchanted ceiling. The darkness retreated before their advance. Where the light touched the cracks in the walls, stone knit back together like healing flesh. With a sound like a great bell tolling, the castle's magic snapped back into harmony. The renewed wards rippled outward in circles of light, sealing Hogwarts once more against the dark. And in years to come, students would tell of that Christmas Eve when song saved Hogwarts. The tradition of one-singing carolers took root, with Elena returning each winter to teach a new generation her art. And on quiet nights, those who listened carefully might still hear the castle humming along with their carols, its ancient magic renewed through music and wonder. The ancient stones of Hogwarts seemed to whisper their secrets as Mopsy made his way through the labyrinth corridors. The air thrummed with an undercurrent of magic, palpable and yet just beyond reach. Mopsy's bare feet padded softly against the worn flagstones, his oversized ears twitching at every unfamiliar sound. He navigated the castle's winding paths by instinct, following the scent of baking bread and roasting meats that wafted through the halls. The aromas grew stronger with each turn, guiding him deeper into the heart of the castle. At last, he found himself standing before a large painting depicting a bowl of fruit, just as he had been told. With a hesitant hand, he reached out and brushed his fingers against the canvas, feeling a slight tingle of magic beneath his touch. The pair in the painting squirmed and giggled, and the frames swung open, revealing the bustling world of the Hogwarts kitchens. Mopsy stepped inside, his senses immediately overwhelmed. The carnivorous room stretched out before him, a hive of activity and organized chaos. House elves scurried to and fro, their nimble hands wielding knives, ladles, and rolling pins with practiced precision. The clatter of pots and pans, the hiss of steam, and the crackle of fires created a cacophony that was at once overwhelming and yet strangely comforting. The aroma of freshly baked bread mingled with the rich, savory scent of roasting meats, making Mopsy's mouth water. He watched in awe as a group of elves worked together to pull a tray of golden brown loaves from a massive stone oven. Their little faces flushed from the heat. At another station, a team of elves was chopping vegetables with blinding speed, their knives a blur of silver against the colourful mounds of carrots, potatoes, and onions. Mopsy marvelled at their skill and coordination, each elf seeming to know exactly what to do and when to do it. "Ah, you must be the new elf. Mopsy, I believe," a voice said, cutting through the din. Mopsy turned to see an older elf approaching, his face lined with wrinkles and his eyes twinkling with warmth. "I'm Grimble, a head elf here at Hogwarts. Welcome to our little corner of the castle." Mopsy felt a rush of nerves as he looked up at Grimble, suddenly feeling very small and very young. "Thank you, sir," he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Grimble chuckled, his laughter a deep, rich sound that seemed to come from his belly. "No need for sir. young one. We're all equals here, all part of the same team." He placed a gnarled hand on Mopsy's shoulder, guiding him deeper into the kitchen. As they walked, Grimble pointed out the various stations and explained their functions. "Over here is where we prepare the soups and stews," he said, indicating a row of large bubbling cauldrons. "We've got everything here from hearty beef and vegetable to lighter broths." Mopsy watched as an elf stirred one of the cauldrons with a long wooden spoon, the steam rising in fragrant curls. Grimble led him to another area where a group of elves was rolling out pastry dough and filling it with various meats and vegetables. "These are our famous pastries," Grimble explained. "Flaky, buttery crust filled with savory goodness. The students can't get enough of them." As they continued their tour, Mopsy noticed 4 long tables at the end of the kitchen, each laden with dishes and platters piled high with food. "What are those for?" he asked, curiosity overcoming his shyness. Grimble smiled. "Those are the house tables," he said. "One for each of the 4 Hogwarts houses. When the food is ready, we send it up to the Great Hall through those." He pointed out to 4 large openings in the ceiling, each emblazoned with a house crest. Mopsy watched in wonder as the dishes began to float upwards. As if carried by invisible hands, they sailed through the openings and vanished from sight. "But how do they get there?" he asked, his eyes wide with amazement. "Magic, of course," Grimble said with a wink. "The same magic that sends the dirty dishes back down to us after the meals." As if on cue, a clatter of plates and cutlery came raining down from the ceiling, landing in large tubs of soapy water. House elves scurried to collect them, scrubbing and scouring until they gleamed like new. "That's where you'll start," Grimble said, handing Mopsy a scrub brush. "Wash the dishes until they shine. Then we'll move you to vegetable prep, then to baking, and so on. In time you'll learn every job in this kitchen." Mopsy took the brush, a sense of pride and purpose filling him. He may not wield a wand, but he could ensure that the students and staff of Hogwarts were well fed and cared for. It was a noble calling, one that he would give his all to fulfill. As the day wore on, Mopsy worked tirelessly, his hands aching from scrubbing dishes, and his eyes watering from the sting of onion juices. But he didn't mind. He was part of something bigger now, a cog in the great machine that was Hogwarts. When at last his final dish was washed, and the final pot scrubbed clean, Grimble led Mopsy to a small door off the main kitchen. "This is where we sleep," he said, opening it to reveal a cozy, dimly lit dormitory. Rows of small little beds lined the walls, each with a neatly folded tea towel at its foot. Mopsy felt a lump form in his throat as he looked around at what would be his home for the foreseeable future. It wasn't much, but it was his, and he was grateful for it. As he climbed into his bed that night, his body exhausted but his heart full, Mopsy felt a sense of belonging wash over him. He had found his place in the world, and he would give it his all, no matter what challenges lay ahead. For he was a house elf of Hogwarts, and that was a noble calling indeed. Mopsy lay awake in the darkness of the dormitory, listening to the gentle snores and mummers of the other house elves. Sleep eluded him, his mind awhirl with the events of the day and the strange restless energy that seemed to thrum through his veins. Unable to bear the restless energy any longer, Mopsy slipped from his bed and padded silently out of the dormitory. The castle corridors were dark and deserted. The only sound the distant creak of settling stone and the soft rustle of slumbering portraits. Mopsy moved through the shadows like a ghost, his bare feet making no sound on the cool flagstones. He let his instincts guide him, following the subtle currents of magic that seemed to permeate the very walls of the castle. Almost before he realized it, he found himself standing in the doorway of a classroom, the charms room, if he wasn't mistaken. Though, in the darkness, it was hard to be sure. Mopsy hesitated for a moment, his heart pounding in his ears. Then, with a deep breath, he stepped inside. The room was still and silent, the desks and chairs casting eerie shadows in the faint moonlight. Mopsy moved slowly, reverently, his eyes wide as he took in the trappings of magical study. The blackboard still bore the fading remnants of the day's lesson. Complex diagrams and incantations that made his head spin. The bookshelves groaned under the weight of countless books, their spines whispering of secrets and mysteries waiting to be unlocked. With trembling fingers, Mopsy reached out and he brushed the smooth, polished wood of a wand that was left lying on a desk. He had seen the wizards use these tools to shape reality to their will, to conjure light and fire, to transform and enchant. What would it be like, he wondered, to wield such power, to feel the magic coursing through him, responding to his every thought and desire. He picked it up, feeling a tingle of power running through his fingers. He waved it experimentally. Sparks flew from the tip, and a feather on a nearby desk rose into the air, hovering for a moment before settling back down. Mopsy's heart raced with joy and fear. He was doing magic, like the wizards. It was everything he had ever dreamed of, and yet he knew it was forbidden. House elves were not meant to wield wands, to learn the spells of wizards. But the lure for him was too strong. Night after night, Mopsy crept from his bed and explored the castle, learning whatever he could from the previous day's lessons. He practiced wand movements in the transfiguration room, whispered incantations in the halls of the astronomy tower, and in the kitchens, while he was working, he began to experiment with his new knowledge. He would slip small charms into the dishes he prepared, enchantments to make the flavors brighter, the textures more appealing. It was subtle magic, barely noticeable, but it filled Mopsy with a sense of pride and purpose. One night, inside the potions room, lost in his forbidden imaginings, Mopsy didn't hear the soft footsteps approaching until a shadow fell across the doorway. He spun around, his heart leaping into his throat, as he found himself face to face with another house elf. It was Gribble, his face a maze of wrinkles, his eyes sharp and penetrating beneath his bristling brows. For a moment, he simply stared at Mopsy, his expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," Gribble said at last, his voice low. It was not a threat, but a simple statement of fact. Mopsy swallowed hard, fighting the urge to flee. I wanted to... He trailed off, unable to put his yearning into words. Gribble sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of centuries. "I know what you wanted," he said, moving to sit on one of the desks. "I've seen it before. That hunger in your eyes, that itch in your fingers, the need to reach out and touch the magic that surrounds us to make it your own." Mopsy said nothing, but he could feel his cheeks burning in the darkness. "There was another one like you once," Gribble continued, his gaze distant, as if seeing into the depths of memory. He too dreamed of doing magic like a wizard, holding a wand, rising above his station. He used to sneak into the library night by night, poring over ancient books, whispering the words of power in the shadows. Despite himself, Mopsy leaned forward, his curiosity overcoming his fear. "What happened to him?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Gribble's face hardened, his eyes glinting like chips of flint. "The magic consumed him," he said, each word heavy. It twisted his body and warped his mind, until there was nothing left of the elf he had been. Now, they say he is a creature of the shadows, a monster that haunts the forgotten places of the castle. Some call him the Shadow Elf. Some are too scared to even speak his name. A chill ran down Mopsy's spine, a primal dread that seemed to coil in the very marrow of his bones. He had heard whispers of the Shadow Elf before, dark tales uttered by the older elves when they thought no one was listening, but he had always dismissed them as mere legend. Stories told to frighten the young and keep them in their place. "You must put these thoughts from your mind, young Mopsy," Gribble said, his tone softening slightly. "The path of magic is not for us. It leads only to ruin and despair. We elves have our own laws and our own magic." Mopsy wanted to argue, to protest that surely there must be another way, but the words died on his lips as he saw the depth of pain and knowledge in Gribble's gaze. And so, with a heavy heart, Mopsy followed Gribble out of the classroom and back to the dormitory. He lay in his bed until dawn, his little mind awhirl with conflicting thoughts and emotions. The warning of the Shadow Elf chilled him to his very core, but it could not entirely extinguish the spark of yearning that smouldered within him. In the days that followed, Mopsy tried to push the forbidden thoughts from his mind, so he threw himself into his work in the kitchens, finding solace in the familiar rhythms of cooking and cleaning. But even as his hands went about their tasks, his mind would still wander to the wands and spell books, to the tantalizing whisper of magic that seemed to linger just beyond his reach. And so, almost without realizing it, Mopsy began to experiment once again. A whispered incantation over a bubbling pot, a subtle enchantment woven into the crust of a pie. They were small magics, hardly worthy of the name, but they filled him with a fierce, secret joy. In these stolen moments, He could imagine himself as a wizard, a wielder of power and knowledge. He told himself that it was harmless, that a little kitchen magic could surely do no great evil. He had tasted magic, and he could not just go back to a life of mundane servitude all the time. And soon Mopsy got more confident. And so, on the fateful night, Mopsy prepared the evening meal. He poured all of his skill and power into a single grand enchantment, a spell that would imbue the food with a magic beyond anything he had attempted before. A magic that would transform who ate it, granting them strength and vitality, wisdom and clarity of mind. As he whispered the final words of the incantation, Mopsy felt a surge of power rush through him. A wild, exhilarating energy that set his body trembling. Food before him glowed with an otherworldly light, pulsing and shimmering with barely contained magic. With a triumphant grin, Mopsy sent the enchanted dishes floating up to the great hall, imagining the looks of wonder and delight that would soon grace the faces of the students and teachers. He could picture them now, marveling at the extraordinary flavors, a sudden rush of power and knowledge that would flood their beings. But Mopsy's dream of glory quickly turned to nightmare as the screams began to echo through the castle. Screams of terror, of agony, of minds and bodies twisted beyond recognition by the wild, uncontrolled magic that coursed through them. In the great hall, chaos reigned as those who had tasted Mopsy's cooking found themselves transformed into monstrous hybrids, their forms melding and warping in grotesque, impossible ways. Students sprouting tentacles, teachers melted into pools of gibbering sentient ooze. The air was filled with the stench of corruption and the cacophony of suffering. Mopsy, huddled in the kitchen, could only listen in horror as the magnitude of his mistake crashed down upon him. He had not brought joy and enlightenment, but madness and despair. In his pride and folly, he had unleashed a plague upon Hogwarts, a twisted mockery of the magic he had so desperately sought to master. As the screams of the afflicted echoed through the halls and the teachers struggled to contain the unfolding horror, Mopsy knew that his transgression would not go unanswered. He had brought the wrath of the wizards down upon himself and upon all of elf kind. The next day, Mopsy found himself in the corridor outside the elf council chamber. It was dark, oppressive. The air hung heavy with a sense of foreboding. Mopsy stood before the ancient wooden door, his heart pounding in his chest and his palms slick with sweat. He had never been summoned before the Council of Elves before, but he knew all too well the gravity of his transgression. With a deep breath, Mopsy pushed the door and stepped inside. The chamber was a vast circular room, its walls lined with tapestries depicting the history of elf-kind. In the center were the members of the council, their faces stern and unreadable. At the head of the council sat Eldrin, the oldest and most respected of the elves. His eyes were like chips of flint, his features carved from ancient stone. He fixed Mopsy with a piercing gaze. "Mopsy," he began, his voice grave. "You stand accused of practicing magic beyond your station, of unleashing chaos and suffering upon Hogwarts. What have you to say for yourself?" Mopsy swallowed hard, his voice trembling as he spoke. I didn't mean for this to happen. I only wanted to learn, to be more than just a servant." Eldrin's eyes narrowed. "You dare to speak of learning, of rising above your place? Such thoughts are dangerous, Mopsy. They lead only to ruin and despair. Elves have their own ways. We have our own magic." He leaned forward, his voice taking a haunted tone. "Have you not heard the tale of the elf who dared to dream of wizard magic? Who sought power beyond his ken, and became the creature we know as the Shadow Elf?" Mopsy's blood ran cold at the mention of the dreaded name. The Shadow Elf. The cautionary tale whispered to frighten young and keep them in their place. That elf was consumed by magic, Eldrin continued. It twisted him, body and mind, until there was nothing left of the elf he had been. And now, his dark legacy lives on. Mopsy felt a wave of horror and guilt crash over him. The great hall lay in ruins, students and teachers alike transformed into grotesque parodies of themselves. Even Madame Pomfrey, with all her skill, could not undo the damage he had wrought. Some students may never recover, Eldrin said, his voice heavy with sorrow and anger. They lie in the hospital wing, disfigured, their lives forever blighted by your transgression. Tears streamed down Mopsy's face, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. He had no words, no defense against the terrible weights of his actions. "There can only be one punishment for such a crime," Eldrin declared. "Banishment." A gasp ran through the chamber. Banishment, the harshest sentence the council could impose, a fate reserved for only the most grievous of offenders. "Mopsy, from this day forth, you are exiled to the darkest, most dangerous corners of Hogwarts," Eldrin intoned. "You will clean and toil in forgotten places, the haunted halls and cursed chambers, and you will be banished in solitude and shame, a testament to the price of your arrogance." With that, the council session ended. The elves filed out of the chamber, their faces grim, and their eyes averted from Mopsy's broken form. As Mopsy was led away by the guards, his mind reeled with the enormity of his punishment. A life of exile and darkness in the shadows of Hogwarts, cut off from the kitchens, from the only world he had ever known. But even in the depths of his despair, a tiny flicker of hope kindled his heart. Out there, in the shadows of Hogwarts, perhaps he might find a way to master the magic that still called to him. It was a desperate, foolish dream, but it was all he had left. The only light in the bleak expanse of his future. And so, as he descended into the bowels of the castle, Mopsy clung to that fragile hope, that ember of defiance. He would survive this exile, this darkness, and somehow, someday, he would find a way to prove them all wrong, he thought. Mopsy felt the darkness pressing in on him as he descended deeper into the forgotten bowels of Hogwarts. The air grew colder, damper. The stone walls slick with moisture and choked with cobwebs. The only light came from the flickering torch he carried, its meager glow barely penetrating the gloom. As he trudged through the winding, narrow passages, Mopsy couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Shadows seemed to shift in the corners of his vision, and the echo of his footsteps sounded unnaturally loud in the oppressive silence. The passages twisted and turned, leading him into chambers filled with strange, rusted contraptions and piles of ancient, mouldering books. Mopsy's heart raced as he imagined what dark secrets might be contained within their crumbling pages. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the darkness. a low, guttural growl that made Mopsy's blood run cold. He froze, his ears straining to pick out the source of the noise. There, in the shadows of a carnivorous room, something moved. A hulking shape, all matted fur and gleaming teeth, its eyes glinting with a feral, hungry light. Mopsy's breath caught in his throat as the beast stalked forward, its claws scraping against the stone floor. He stumbled backwards, his mind racing as he tried to remember any scrap of defensive magic he had learned. But before he could act, a bolt of sickly green light shot out from the darkness, striking the beast in the side. It let out a hideous shriek, its body convulsing as the spell coursed through it. Mopsy spun around, trying to locate the source of the magic, but a sharp blow to the back of his head sent him crashing to the ground. Stars exploded across his vision, and then everything went black. When he came to, Mopsy found himself chained to a chair in a dimly lit chamber. The air was thick with the stench of decay and dark magic, and the walls seemed to pulse with a malevolent energy. Well, well, a voice rasped from the shadows. What have we here? Mopsy's heart nearly stopped as a figure emerged from the darkness. It was an elf, but unlike any he had ever seen. Its skin was ashen and wrinkled, its eyes sunken and glowing with an eerie, otherworldly light. Dark robes hung from its emaciated frame, and its long, claw-like fingers were wrapped around a gnarled staff. A little elfling, lost in the dark, the figure mused, its voice a sinister whisper. How delightful. Mopsy's mouth went dry as he realized who or what he was facing. The Shadow Elf. The dark legend made flesh. What do you want with me? He stammered, his voice shaking with terror. The Shadow Elf grinned, revealing a mouthful of rotting, jagged teeth. Oh, I think you know, little one, it hissed, leaning in close. I've been watching you, Mopsy. I've seen the magic that burns within you. I've seen the hunger for power that consumes your thoughts. Mopsy shook his head desperately, tears streaming down his face. No, he choked out. I've never wanted this. I only wanted to learn, to be more than just a servant. The shadow elf's eyes glinted with a cruel, knowing light. Ah, but that's always how it starts, isn't it? It purred. A little knowledge, taste of power, and then, before you know it, you're consumed by it, twisted into something else. It reached out, its cold, dead fingers brushing against Mopsy's cheek. I can teach you, Mopsy, it whispered, its voice a seductive poison. I can show you the true depths of magic, the secrets that the wizards and the elves have hidden away. All you have to do is embrace the darkness. Just let it into your heart. Mopsy recoiled, his stomach churning with revulsion. But even as he shrank from the shadow elf's touch, a small, traitorous part of his mind couldn't help but be intrigued by its words. The secrets of magic, the power he had always dreamed of. Could it really be within his grasp? Or was this just another trap? Another cruel twist in the nightmare his life had become? As he hung there in the darkness, chained and helpless, Mopsy felt the weight of his exile, his punishment pressing down on him. But perhaps, in the twisted depths of the shadow elf's lair, he might find the key to his salvation, or his damnation. The choice, it seemed, was his to make. The shadow elf circled Mopsy like a predator, its sunken eyes glinting with a malevolent hunger. Mopsy shivered, the chains biting into his skin as he strained against his bonds. You have potential, little elf, the shadow elf rasped, its voice like the scraping of dead leaves. I can feel the magic pulsing within you, raw and untamed. With the right training, you could become a force to be reckoned with. Mopsy's heart raced. The shadow elf's words were like poisoned honey, tempting and deadly. We are not so different, you and I, the creature said. We both yearn for something more than a life of servitude. The shackles of tradition that bind our kind. It leaned in close, its breath cold and foul against Mopsy's face. You might know me as the shadow elf, it whispered. My real name is Morin. I was once like you, young, curious, filled with dreams of a better life for our people. I served on the Council of Elves, respected and admired by all. He began to pace, his robe swirling around his frame, but I knew that true change could never come from within the rigid confines of elf society. We needed an ally, someone who could bridge the gap between our world and the world of wizards. Mopsy listened, transfixed, as Morin spun his tale. Morin told him how Albus Dumbledore, the great wizard and headmaster, had sensed the power within him and had taken Morin under his wing. Morin told him how together they had planned to go to the Ministry of Magic to advocate for the rights and freedom of elf kind. But the elders, the traditionalists of the elves, they couldn't abide the thought of change. Morin spat, his face contorting with ancient anger. They feared the disruption of the old ways, and so they banished me, condemned me to the shadows, to be a cautionary tale for any elf who dared to dream of something more. But my exile has not been in vain, Morin said, a fierce light burning in his eyes. In the darkness, I have honed my craft, mastered magics beyond the ken of any elf or wizard. And now, with you by my side, we can finish what I started all those years ago. He extended a gnarled hand, the skin like ancient parchment. Let me teach you, Mopsy, he urged. Let me show you the true potential of elves. Together, we can break the chains that bind us and forge a new world from the ashes of the old. Mopsy hesitated, fear and temptation warring within him. To accept Morin's offer was to step into the unknown, to embrace the very darkness he had been taught to fear. But the thought of the students, twisted and suffering from his magical mishap, weighed heavily upon his conscience. If Morin could help him undo the damage, if his power could be used for good. Slowly, trembling, Mopsy reached out and took Morin's hand. The Shadow Elf's grip was cold and strong, and Mopsy felt a surge of dark energy through him at the contact. And so, in the depths of Hogwarts' forgotten places, Mopsy's true education began. Under Morin's tutelage, he delved into magics both wondrous and terrible, learning spells and techniques that no elf had ever dreamed of. Mopsy and Morin crept through the darkened halls of Hogwarts, their footsteps echoing softly on the stone floors. The castle was eerily silent. In the hospital wing, the transformed students lay in their beds, their bodies twisted and warped by the wild magic of Mopsy's mishap. Madame Pomfrey had done her best, but even her considerable skills were not enough to undo the damage. Morin surveyed the scene, his sunken eyes glinting with determination. "We must work quickly," he murmured. "The magic that afflicts them is strong, but not unbreakable." Mopsy nodded, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and excitement. Together, they began to weave their magic, their voices rising and falling in an ancient, haunting chant. Mopsy could feel the power coursing through him, dark and intoxicating, as he shaped the energies to his will. Slowly, painfully, the students began to change. Twisted limbs straightened, distorted features smoothed back to their original forms, tentacles disappearing. It was a grueling, exhausting process, but Mopsy refused to let his concentration waver. They were so focused on their task that they didn't hear the approaching footsteps until it was too late. A blast of red light shot out from the doorway, striking Morin in the chest and sending him crumpling to the ground. Mopsy spun around, a defensive spell on his lips, but a second stunner caught him before he could cast. When he came to, Mopsy awoke in a familiar place, the council chamber of the elves. He was bound and kneeling on the stone-cold floor, Morin beside him in a similar state. The elders of the council loomed over them, their faces grim and their eyes hard. "Mopsy?" Eldrin intoned, his voice dripping with contempt. "You dare to return here after all you have done, and in the company of this creature." He gestured to Morin, his lip curling in disgust. Mopsy's heart raced, but he forced himself to meet Eldrin's gaze. "We came to undo the harm I caused," he said, his voice shaking but determined. "To heal the students, and to challenge the way things have always been." A murmur ran through the council, a mix of shock and outrage. "You would dare to question our ways," another elder demanded. "To align yourself with this shadow elf, this bringer of ruin? Mopsy took a deep breath. This had been the moment he had been dreading, but also the moment he had been preparing for. "His name is Morin," he said, his little voice growing stronger. "And he is not the monster you have made him out to be. He is a visionary, a champion of elf rights and freedom, and he should be allowed to return to his rightful place among us." The chamber erupted in chaos, elves shouting and gesticulating wildly. "Blasphemy!" Eldrin roared, his face purple with rage. "You would bring this corrupted being back into our midst and overturn centuries of tradition? I will see you both exiled for this, cast out forever from elf society." But before Eldrin could make good on his threat, a new voice cut through the din. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Eldrin." Every head turned to the entrance of the chamber, and there, standing tall and serene, was Albus Dumbledore himself. His blue eyes twinkled behind his half-moon spectacles, but there was a steely resolve in his gaze. "Dumbledore?" Eldrin sputtered, his anger giving way to confusion. "What is the meaning of this intrusion?" Dumbledore smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I am here to invoke the ancient laws of the elves," he said calmly. "Laws which state that any elf, no matter the crime, may return to their people after a certain span of years. And by my reckoning, Morin's exile ended long ago." He turned to face the council, his voice growing stern. "Moreover, I believe it is high time that this body considered the proposal that Morin and I brought before you all those years ago. A proposal to grant elves their freedom, to allow them to choose their own paths in life." A stunned silence fell over the chamber. Mopsy's heart soared with hope, even as he saw the elders' faces darken with anger and fear. "And let us not forget," Dumbledore continued, "the great service that Mopsy and Morin have done for Hogwarts this night. They have healed the students and the teachers, and done a great wrong. Surely such actions are worthy of celebration, not condemnation." He smiled again, a twinkle in his eye. Perhaps, in light of this, the elves of Hogwarts might consider expanding their roles, working alongside Madame Pomfrey in the hospital wing, using their unique magics to help and to heal. It would be a noble calling, and a step towards the brighter future we all seek. Mopsy held his breath, hardly daring to hope. The council was silent. the elders exchanging glances heavy with meaning. Finally, Eldrin spoke, his voice heavy with reluctance. "The wizard speaks wisdom," he admitted. "Morin's exile has indeed run its course, and his actions this night, alongside young Mopsy, cannot be ignored." He turned to face Morin, his expression unreadable. You may return to us," he said formally, "and your proposal and Dumbledore's will be given the consideration it deserves." Morin bowed his head, a single tear trickling down his weathered cheek. "Thank you, Eldrin," he whispered. "You will not regret this chance at a new beginning." As the bindings fell away from Mopsy's wrists, he felt a wave of emotion almost overwhelming in its intensity. Joy, relief, vindication, and a sense of purpose unlike any he had ever known. The road ahead would not be easy. Centuries of tradition and prejudice could not be undone in a single night. But for the first time, he allowed himself to hope, to dream of a world where elves and wizards could stand side by side as equals. And as he looked at Morin, the pride and determination shining in the old elf's eyes, Mopsy knew that he had found more than just a teacher or even a friend. He had found a true leader, a visionary who would guide their people into a bright and shining future. The dawn was coming, and with it a new era of elf-kind. And Mopsy would be there to see it. Every step of the way. The halls of the Ministry of Magic lay veiled in evening shadows as Aura Elara Dawson made her way to the late wizard's office. Though the torches flickered low, their firelight glinted off the golden Ministry emblem embossed on each heavy oak door Elara passed. The clacking echo of her boots broke the tomb-like silence that shrouded these empty corridors at night. Upon arriving at the end of the hall, Elara lifted her illuminated wand tip to the door plate. Magical portraits and records to vision. the slab of wood creaked open. Inside, flecks of gold leaf glimmered amidst the office's sombre hues. Mahogany walls, Persian rug of navy and burgundy, the cherry wood desk where the wizard's body now slumped motionless. Dark spatters stained the front of his plum velvet robes. Elara circled the heavy-set frame of Armando Basil, senior records keeper, examining his desk and body for clues. The only break in the office's meticulous order was a painting on the far wall, depicting an aged wizard gazing back at her. But as Elara studied those lifelike brushstrokes, the portrait gave a shudder and stilled, its subject appearing just as dead as the man at the desk. Strange, Elara thought, for a portrait to lose its animation so completely. She swept her wand around the room, muttering detection charms that filled the air with scattering gold and sparks, yet revealed no traces of dark magic. Perplexed but dedicated to uncovering the truth, Elara settled in to await the investigative team. Thoughts swirling around the twin mysteries that lay before her. The two figures frozen in death, their secrets still held fast in shadow. A rap at the door announced Senior Aura, Gareth Haynes. Report, Aura Dawson. Elara summarized her efforts, admitting the lack of progress. No sign of foul play yet, but something seems off. Why hasn't the Ministry announced Basil's death? High-profile cases usually warrant public alerts in the Daily Prophet, at least. Haynes clasped his hands behind his back. The Minister insists on absolute discretion regarding Basil's passing. His eyes flicked to the lifeless portrait. Best we keep speculation quiet for now. Elara bristled at the circumvention of protocols but respected Haynes's wisdom. After he departed, she turned the conversation to the portrait. Looking closely, she could see the name of the artist, E. Grimshaw. Over the next few days, Elara encountered more obstacles. Simple requests for Basil's travel logs and schedule were denied, or disappeared into the bowels of the Ministry bureaucracy. Each dead end eroded her trust. But But she did learn from a statement that Basil's wife had said he had worked increasingly late nights at the ministry those last few weeks. She tried another avenue. Determined, she buried herself in genealogical archives until a single reference emerged on Grimshaw, an artist imprisoned in Azkaban 40 years prior for creating dangerous magical portraits. However, she even found it difficult to access Grimshaw's records. Everywhere she turned, she hit a brick wall. She then requested a list of prisoners detained in Azkaban. A moment later, a memo fluttered back. She scanned through the list of prisoners and saw the name marked E. Grimshaw. Elara now knew who might reveal answers. Gathering her wand and cloak, Aura Dawson departed to seek truths only Elias Grimshaw might provide. The sea churned slate grey as Elara's chartered boat crossed the swelling waves. In the distance, Azkaban rose from jagged rocks, its cracked towers like hungry stone fangs waiting to devour hope. Even magicked barriers couldn't mute the dread as howls echoed from those impenetrable walls. Shivering, Elara disembarked, one hand on the trunk containing the mysterious portrait. Its weight seemed to increase with each reluctant step as she entered the fortress. The chill from the walls seeped deeper than skin or bone. Torch flames guttered low along the maze of corridors. All was mildew, rust, and wretched cries. The guards led Elara downward to a door barred with black iron. The high security wing, one muttered. Dementors float by often enough. You better watch out. He refused to escort her any further. Alone now, Elara whispered, "Lumos," and stared at the sign on the locked gate. Dangerous detainees. Her heart raced. But she'd come too far to falter. Steadying herself, she stepped into the passage beyond. The inmates here were utterly still, but for fleeting movements behind bars. Eyes gleamed from sunken faces at Elara's approach. The criminal magic of this place crept into her bones until finally she got to the end cell. answers lay in this cell. Answers heavy as the portrait in her trunk and the darkness surrounding her. Gripping her wand tighter, Elara went to meet the artist of Azkaban. Hunched on a dingy cot, Elias Grimshaw seemed merged with the shadows. Grey stubbled face bent over a stretched canvas in front of him. As Elara's wand light pierced the gloom, he looked up, eyes gleaming from sunken sockets. His hands were smudged in pigments that also streaked his ragged clothes. Half-finished portraits surrounding glared or gazed back. Portraits of witches and wizards rendered in chaotic, lifelike style. "We don't get visitors here," he rasped, voice rough with disuse. When she introduced herself as an aura, Elias cackled. "An officer of the law, gracing decrepit old Elias. To what do I owe such an honor?" Elara cleared her throat, unnerved by mocking eyes following her around the cell. "I hoped you might explain your painting methods. How do you capture such vitality?" Elias snatched up his brush, mixing oils, burnt umber, sulphur yellow, crimson like clotted blood. With his offhand, he drew his wand, murmuring a charm. A brush came out from the end of his wand. He then held it upwards. "You want to watch old Elias work his stained magic, hmm?" With sharp gestures, he commanded the enchanted wand to brush violent curves across the canvas. "They toss me random tack, hog hair and wood scraps." His voice adopted a fey lilt. "But all the materials Elias yearns for. It's the personal touches, my dear." His tongue flicked out, lips drawing back from yellowed teeth. "That's the secret, you see. The essence painter in my paintings. The blood, the spit." Bristles dripped carmine as he crafted a petrified, hollowed-eyed face. "I paint the blood of a wizard into my art. Hence, I paint their souls into my art, Miss Elara." Around them, facets emerged from pigment-smeared images, watching, haunting. Were those portraits or prison bars? Alara's instincts screamed to flee this mad realm. But she stood transfixed as Elias cackled, plunging his nightmare visions onto canvas after canvas. Shadows draped Elias's hunched frame where he perched on a rust-eaten stool. Alara cleared her throat. "Pardon me, but are you familiar with Armando Basil, the Ministry records keeper?" Without glancing up, Elias gave a raspy chuckle. "Lass, the only Ministry folk I know now are the rats and roaches that scurry these cells at night." He tapped his temple. 40 years of Azkaban. Scrub your social calendar clean. "I see. Well, I'm investigating Basil's recent murder." From her satchel, Alara withdrew the portrait, considering how best to broach the subject. She moved closer to the bars. Elias's piercing eyes flicked up to assess her. This portrait hung in Basil's office. It was disturbed when he was found dead 3 nights ago. The wizard in the portrait completely dead. She turned the painting towards Elias. With a snort, Elias dropped his gaze back to the oils and powders, clotting his hands. "Lass, the faces I paint blend together after a while." His words trailed off as Alara pushed the canvas closer, patience fraying. With a grumble, the prisoner wiped his hands and accepted the portrait. Alara studied his craggy features as Elias examined the painting in the guttering torchlight. She saw the exact moment of recognition flooding his eyes. They widened, pupils shrinking as his face blanched beneath the scraggly beard. Shackled hands began to tremble, the canvas shaking. "No, it cannot be. This is my painting, but I've never seen one like..." Elias trailed off, slowly pivoting to face the back wall of his cell, a low moan building in his throat. He sank down against the grimy stones, still clutching the painting, one dirt-caked finger tracing the contorted face captured mid-scream. Alara hesitated, debating whether to interrupt his distress. But answers waited behind the prisoner's haunted gaze. She had to push forward. She asked him gently, "You recognize the wizard in the portrait?" "I knew that poor soul's name, yes," Elias confessed in an agonized undertone. but creating him in oil and brushstroke has marked us both for dire fates. Recoiling from the painted face, Elias gripped tighter to the painting. The walls themselves may betray us here. You must lean closer to me, lass. Elara moved tight towards the bars. Elias walked towards her. Now they were face to face. Years ago, a shadow faction inside the Ministry of Magic approached me about my talents. My magic that crudely echoes through my portraits. They aimed to exploit such power for their personal agendas. I had no choice. I've been creating portraits for this shadow government from this very cell. Swallowing hard, Elias revealed the threats and vile bargains. Certain portraits were now spying upon critical Ministry of Magic rooms, feeding insider secrets to advance this covert group's goals. They care nothing for laws, only power plays and dangerous knowledge held over adversaries. What their ultimate goal is, I don't know, but I can tell you it won't be any good. I shouldn't be saying this. They'll be listening. Elias searches Lara's gaze beseechingly. Even Hogwarts houses host bewitched portraits, parroting private conversations to my enemies. Alara whispered back. But how does this explain Basil's death? And why is the wizard in your portrait dead? They wanted me to create a similar portrait to the one that put me in Azkaban. You see, Miss Alara, I can give the portraits the power to cast a few spells. Only a few. The magic in the mixture of paint and blood can only last so long. After the portraits cast their spells, the wizard or witch in the portrait dies. Elias choked up, tears in his eyes. My work, my beautiful work dies. Elara looked at him in shock and disbelief. You mean your portrait? It killed Basil? Shutting his eyes against painful memories, Elias revealed his most recent commission. The portrait bespelled to harness deadly magic. They gave me no name, but this face, and traces of his blood for my paint. He turned the painting towards Alara once more. Yes, my portrait. My portrait must have killed Basil. But This means that Basil must have stumbled on to their plot. He must have been close to exposing this shadow government. It's the only reason they would have commissioned me to make such a painting. Gripping her hands, Elias whispered urgently, "You tread a razor's edge investigating this case, lass. You must expose these vipers before others meet fates akin to the records keeper, or worse." Cold dread trickled down Alara's spine at the prisoner's ominous words. She had come anticipating a killer, only to land amidst a secret war for the Ministry of Magic's very soul. Fresh determination steeling her nerves, she gently urged, "Please, tell me more of these shadow factions secretly pulling strings within the Ministry's walls." Alara's pulse was still hammering from Elias's dark revelations when a sound snatched her attention. Faint scratching from the far corner of the cell. She turned with a gasp. One of Elias's many portrait subjects had stirred to life. A wide-eyed warlock painted in a nightscape. As Alara froze beneath the portrait wizard's unblinking stare, Elias grabbed her wrist, his own eyes narrowing. "Stand clear of whatever phantom takes from here, lass." The scratching intensified as the warlock's hands twisted in intricate gestures. Alara scarcely had time to obey Elias's warning before jagged lightning erupted from the canvas itself. The warlock had cast a spell. Alara crashed aside, feeling heat blister her cheek. As the spell exploded, Elias's caught in a violent hail of smoking feathers. Twisting up from her painfully sprawled legs, Alara watched in horror as the warlock summoned another barrage with fingers now burned black. But abruptly, the smoking digits convulsed, sloughing away in ashes that spread rapidly across the rest of the painted form. Within moments, the illusion peeled away completely from the portrait's bared backing. In the echoing aftermath, all Alara could hear was her own frantic breathing and Elias's low cursing. As he helped her stand on unsteady feet, she pressed her fingertips against her stinging cheek. They came away bloody, a mere echo wielding traces of the warlord magic preserved in paint and varnish. Elias bit off, glaring accusations at the now empty canvas. "I told you they were listening. They know you are here." But clear as any speech, the message comes from those serpents yet holding my leash. gripping Alara's wrist with sudden urgency. His eyes pleaded with hers. "This attack was a warning, lass. You've stirred a nest of vipers who'll strike at any threat to their secrets. Tread carefully in the ministry's den, or share my fate they aim to ensure." The prisoner's dire secrets and the assassination attempt had shattered her faith. The ministry she served now resembled a den of serpents. She thought back on the case's strange obstructions. Doors closed against inquiries, misdirection from superiors. At the time, it had merely puzzled her. But recalled through the lens of Eliza's story, the veiled hostility took on sinister shades. They had aimed to stifle her investigation, keep their secrets buried. Instead, her persistence had stirred the shadow faction to bear its fangs directly. And if Elias spoke the truth, this ran deeper than cover-ups or scapegoats. This was a vice slowly closing upon the ministry itself, throttling justice for darker purpose. Quiet fury kindled in Alara's chest, burning through the lingering pain and fear. She had pledged her career, her very life, to protecting the wizarding world. Could she walk away now, willfully blinding herself from this corruption? Lifting her head, Alara sought Eliza's gaze. "The dangers now stand clearer thanks to you," she said quietly. "And I mean to drag this ugly truth into light, along with any who stand against that cause." She stood, muscles taut with fresh resolve. This had become more than solving a mere murder. This was a crusade to haul the ministry back from the brink. And she would see it done, or die trying. The next morning, Alara hurried to the records office. Yesterday's revelations kindling each step. The ministry now felt different around her. But she pulled up sharply at the sight of her boss, Gareth Haynes, exiting Basil's office, clasping the hands of Basil's widow, now crying, walking past Alara down the corridor. Unease stirred as Alara watched her pass. She then approached Haynes. "Sir, the Basil case. Certain strange aspects suggest need for further inquiry. Might we discuss?" But Haynes silenced her politely. "The matter is settled. I've ruled poor Armando took his own life by misadventure." He sighed heavily. A tragedy of secrets and inner demons hounding that poor man. we need to leave his grieving family in peace. Alara followed Haynes in shock to his office, her zeal for revelation tempered by his jarring news. Had she misjudged the shadows within the ministry in her haste? Haynes gestured for her to sit, before sliding a folded newspaper across the desk with official documents. Alara sank into the chair as the Daily Prophet's bold headline assaulted her. Despondent ministry records keeper takes own life. As she scanned the detailed description of Basil's supposed mental decline, Haynes summarized gently. I tried to advise you against needless speculation earlier, my dear. Sometimes the full truth only brings more pain when past scars run too deep. He placed a copy of the psychological evaluation and ministry accident ruling before her. Alara looked between them and her superior, clarity crumbling by the moment. The analysis echoed the prophet's narrative unraveling. Depression, unhealthy obsessions. Both concluded Basil had used his access to artifacts to engineer his own elaborate demise. Misadventure by enchanted amulet, it seems. Likely some family heirloom not properly registered, Haynes recounted. The poor sod probably thought staging a mystery might save his reputation or his family's. Haynes squeezed Alara's shoulder, his eyes full of paternal sympathy. Not all investigations end with neat answers or culprits to blame. Sometimes we can only stand witness to tragedy and try preventing the next lost soul from meeting such an end. Lara lowered the damning report with shaking hands. She had hit so many dead ends this past week. But was that truly obscurity at play, or her own desperate grasping for external evil, rather than accept a broken man's final demons? Had she dragged an innocent prisoner into wild conspiracy to avoid that painful truth, that sometimes justice came too late? Lara sat in lump silence, Basil's suicide ruling cold in her hands. She thought of all she had learned from Azkaban prisoner Elias Grimshaw. Vile secrets suggesting conspiracy ran rife within the ministry walls. Finally, she raised her head. Sir, the prisoner alleged hidden factions manipulating justice for personal gain. Having witnessed obstruction myself, I believe investigation into such accusation warrants. Haynes raised his hand, his look turning stern. Tread carefully, voicing wild tales, spun by men locked in cells half their lives. Opening a thick folder, he spread psychological reports across his desk. Elias Grimshaw, resident 30 years for acts of madness and murder. Haynes gestured at clinical accounts of hallucinations, paranoid ramblings. His disease is long documented, my dear. Tell me true, is the testimony of a confined lunatic worth sullying Basil's good name? Lara traced shaking hands over page after page, showing Grimshaw's supposed descent into violence and delirium. Had she let a deranged man manipulate her trust? Had she invented connections from scattered shadows simply to avoid truth too ordinary to accept? She remembered the inmate's feverish eyes alive with dark fervor, his cramped cell papered in disturbing portraits. With dawning unease, she wondered which of them had truly lost their grasp on reason and reality. Later, in her dim office, a tap on the door broke Ilara's hollow silence. She blinked up at her superior hovering in the threshold, his smile not reaching his eyes. We all lose our way chasing shadows sometimes, Haynes said gently. I've brought you a present. I knew how much you liked it. Just a little something to brighten you up, he declared, raising up a portrait. In his hands was the portrait she had brought to Azkaban. Elias's portrait that used to hang in Basil's office. However, the disturbed portrait concealing the unknown wizard was now staring out at Ilara, no longer dead, freshly painted. I'm sure Basil won't mind you having this. Taking out his wand, Haynes levitated the painting to hang prominently on her wall. But his smile remained taut as he turned to depart. Fascinating piece, isn't it? He gripped her shoulder tightly. Too tightly, she thought. We all lose our way chasing shadows sometimes. No more wild conspiracy theories, though, yes? Best leave the past buried, my dear. For your own good. The door clicked shut, leaving Ilara alone with the painting subject, probing her with that penetrating gaze. She shuddered, remembering prisoner Elias's disturbed dreams about this face. Unease curdling in her gut. Ilara realized she had slipped free of one web, only to land in another potentially more deadly. For corruption's fangs left deeper scars than any mere killer's. And she could no longer blindly trust even her nearest allies not to harbor its spreading poison. Staring up at the newly animated portrait, she wondered, was Gareth Haynes one of them?